Welcome to Echoes in the Gallery. I am your host, Susan L. Sistrunk. Tonight, we begin the second volume of the series, Between the Lines. In episode 2, Allure or Allure, Victoria is running out of strength and resolve. She must concoct a plan to match wits with her captor and remain alive long enough to escape. How far will Victoria go to outmaneuver this unknown man who holds her captive? Her decisions may shock you. Let us step into the gallery and begin. Chapter 2: Allure or Allure. The last 2 days had gone well. He was bringing Victoria food regularly. She was working and he seemed pleased. The punishments were at a standstill. With some good sleep and food, Victoria was able to think clearly. And her plan was already in motion. He was looking at her softer. It was about time for the man to show up with her dinner. Victoria could now gauge the time of day by the kind of food he brought. Hot oatmeal came in the morning, today and yesterday. Before, the food had been sandwiches at every meal, and they had been spread out far, making it impossible to know the time. She had fallen asleep sporadically, not knowing when it was actually nighttime. Now, Victoria had an idea of time. Sandwiches now arrived in the middle of the meals. She stayed awake until the third meal, and for a while after eating, giving her body a sense of rhythm. She made sure to smile at him and show gratitude for everything he brought, complimenting the food, which actually wasn't bad at all. The man could cook, and while he wasn't a contestant for a television chef contest, he could definitely hold his own in the kitchen. Victoria noticed the man was also dressing nicer. He was obviously ironing his button-down shirts and jeans instead of the rumpled-up t-shirts and pants he had been wearing. He was softening. She could tell. He now took extra care with the wound on her foot, making sure no infection had set in. Victoria had said she was really worried about it. The man cried a little when he looked at it and apologized. She looked at him and said softly, "I understand. Really. It's okay. You were just trying to teach me. Don't feel bad." Victoria reached up and wiped away the man's tears. She was sorry there wasn't a camera. She was probably going to be in line for an Academy Award by the time this ordeal was over. Her life depended on it. Victoria had found a new resolve in the energy for more sleep. She would make it through this. She had no choice. It would take everything which existed inside, but there was no other option. He looked at her with a soft smile and reached up to brush the hair from Victoria's forehead. The pit of her stomach lurched in revulsion. Victoria kept her cool and smiled back. I could really use a shower soon. Is there any way that could happen?" During her time in the room, he had given her hot water and a washcloth for cleaning. Her hair had not been washed in weeks. We will see what you write tonight. You've been doing much better with it." The man eyed Victoria suspiciously. What if she was playing him? "I'm not sure I can trust you. We'll just see what happens." With that, the man turned and walked out the door. Victoria looked down at the tray of food he had brought for dinner. The aroma came up as she lifted the cover and her stomach growled. While the food was better, she was still not eating enough to be fully strong. A small piece of roast, some potatoes, a salad, and a plastic cup of tea. But he had also brought something else, and not stayed to watch her eat for once. Sitting on the tray right next to the plate of food were a plastic fork and a knife. A tear slid down her cheek through the tangled mess of hair matted around Victoria's face. It could be an opportunity. But she knew the strength was not in her yet. After weeks of food and sleep deprivation, there was no way she could overpower the man. If she attempted and failed, his trust would be lost and she would be back at square one. Sniffling loudly, she also realized he was probably watching her from somewhere and would know the minute anything seemed amiss. She must bide her time and stick to her new plan. It would only work if she gained his trust fully. With that, Victoria picked up her knife and fork and began to eat slowly, making sure to chew every morsel intentionally. Everything was important, and she needed to make the food count. After a while, the man came back. She knew he had been watching. In his hand was a reward when the door opened, a slice of chocolate cake. Victoria looked up, feigning surprise and gratitude. "A little dessert before you work for a while? It's still early, so I would like to see a few pages this evening. You should think about Rachel's character. She hasn't done good things and needs to atone for her sins." Victoria had not yet addressed Rachel, but the man had been complacent with her reasoning that other matters in the story must be attended to first. Now, with the tide turning and the man softening toward her, it was time to lure him in farther. This may be her chance to actually get a shower and see where she was located. She ate the cake and handed the man the paper dishes. After he cleared them, he sat on the edge of the bed to watch her work. The chain around her ankle reached just far enough to the desk from the joint welded to the bed frame. She worked in silence, let the writing overtake her, and was thrown back to Terlingua. Victoria better make this good. Gwen and Eric raced down the highway to Terlingua. They were almost there, but sitting in silence. Would this all end soon? And then they saw the flames climbing into the desert night. Off in the distance, the hotel was burning into the sky. Gwen turned to Eric and searched his eyes for the answer. There were no answers to be found. They sped down the highway for a while until spotting a figure off the road running through the desert. Eric screeched the SUV off the road and began to follow the evasive person. It must be one of their crew, but with dark clothes and a hood over the head, the identity was impossible to recognize. A fence suddenly stopped their progress, and Eric jumped out of the driver's door, hurtling toward the running figure. Just as it looked like the person would skip over the arroyo to safety on the other side, Eric slammed into the person's shoulder, making them lose balance and slide to the ground. The person wrestled and flayed as Gwen struggled to meet up. After reaching the two, Gwen looked at a furious Rachel, pinned down under Eric's strength. "Where is Jonathan?" Gwen shouted after Eric stood Rachel up with her hands behind her. "What have you done, you crazy bitch?" Rachel looked down at Gwen and spit in her face. "What do you care? He was a pain and we both know it. I did you a favor, you whiny little girl. You could have never pulled off what I did, and you know it." Gwen had a feeling of dread in the pit of her stomach. Her voice became quiet. "Where is Jonathan, Rachel? What have you done?" With her arms still behind her back, Rachel looked at Gwen in defiance and self-gratification. "He's dead, but the blast didn't kill him. I had the guts to take care of him myself, something you would have never been able to do. You were always just a spineless little twerp. Jonathan always felt so sorry for you. He needed to be with someone strong because he was just as weak as you are. So yes, I did it. I killed him, and I'm not even sorry about it." With that, Gwen snapped. She ripped Rachel away from Eric and began hitting her as hard as possible. Something had snapped inside, and it was no longer possible to hold her hatred for this woman inside. It was time to end this. Her feelings for Jonathan came to the surface as if a dam burst. All the years of pent-up rage broke free as Gwen grabbed Rachel by the hair and, using the full force of her body, slammed Rachel's head against the nearest granite boulder. The venomous fuel of Gwen's emotion did not let her stop. She kept pounding Rachel against the unforgiving surface. This time, Eric did not stop her. He understood this had to be. Gwen stopped after some time and looked down at the unrecognizable form of Rachel lying in front of her. Blood covered her face and had sprayed on the ground. The dry desert land already soaking in her life force. Eric waited for the tears from Gwen, but this time there were none. She looked at Eric and smiled. If he hadn't felt that the two of them had bonded over the last few days and had a connection, that smile would have chilled him to the bone. The man looked at Victoria and smiled. Perfect! This is just amazing. I knew you had it in you. I can't wait to see what happens next. Victoria smiled at the man demurely. I thought you would like it. It's so nice of you really to encourage me as you have. Thank you. I am so glad you're finally seeing things the right way. The man reached down and stroked her hair. Every fiber in Victoria's being wanted to vomit, but she held it in and smiled up at him from her chair. She took his hand and kissed it. Looking into his eyes, she said softly, Yes, I see now. Get some sleep, Victoria. Tomorrow is a brand new day. I will get you some items for you to be able to shower properly. Will you be warm enough with the extra blankets I brought? Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm sure I will sleep wonderfully this evening. With that, the man turned and left. Victoria had planted the seed, a very powerful seed. And she had meant it when she talked to him. She did now see. Everything was now crystal clear to Victoria. She was going to survive. And now she knew how. This concludes episode 2, Allure or Allure, in volume 2. What did you think? I'm always interested to hear feedback. Remember, paid subscribers to my podcast receive exclusive content weekly from me about the writing process, inspiration, and more. Echoes in the Gallery continues to be available on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcasts. Join me, your host, Susan L. Sistrunk, next time for episode 3 of volume 2, Back from the Grave. Until then, thank you for listening. Stay safe and love each other.